Alright, so hey everyone, today I want to take a look at Little Witch Nobeta and its Deadzones. So specifically this is for the demo. It's been out in early access for a bit, and probably by the time I upload this video, the release version will be out. So I don't know if these have been updated in those versions, but if these issues carry through, it'd be nice to see these updated at some point. But to get into it, the camera uses about a 17% square or axial deadzone. And this means that you have to move further in the corners before you start seeing any movement occur. And axial deadzones have the side effect of restricting diagonal movement around the axes. So I can make these bobbing motions and move perfectly left and perfectly right, perfectly up, and perfectly down. It isn't until you move outside of both axis deadzones where you start seeing diagonal movement occur. This is most obvious when capping the view like this. This isn't great because this limits how much of the stick can output diagonal movement, and makes more of the stick only output one of 4 directions. So the angles you point with the stick are not being output in camera movement correctly. The acceleration curve actually doesn't start at 0, it starts at about 8%. And then from then on, increases linearly until its maximum. %, might not sound like a lot, but this is where generally your very precise adjustments will come from, your precise turn rates. So losing these can make, when you're trying to make precise adjustments, make it feel either overly sensitive or very slippery because you simply don't have access to the very like pixel perfect values that you should be able to have access to. This seems to map to about a 10% dead zone. The curve seems to be scaled around that. So this might be a result of there being that inherent or base 10% dead zone, and having another dead zone built on top of it, but not rescaling the acceleration, so that it's just cropping that early part of the curve. This may apply, throughout the stick movement. So your diagonals may be affected as well, as you can see here. Just breaking out of the dead zone, it starts a bit abruptly. So the same thing might be happening here, meaning that your subtle angles are being cropped off because of this. The last thing I want to mention with the camera is the frame rate. The frame rate directly controls the camera sensitivity. So at 120 frames, you can see that the maximum turn rate is pretty brisk. But if we drop this to 30 frames, it's quite slow. And in this case specifically, it's a quarter of the speed. This obviously isn't great, because if you hit performance, like if your game is running, perfectly at the frame cap you set, then there's no issue whatsoever. However, if you hit areas where you have performance issues, the sensitivity will fluctuate. But even for players wanting to play at a specific cap, but for the console versions as well, I don't know what they'll be capped to, 30 or 60. If it works the same here, this will functionally limit what your maximum sensitivity is. So if it's capped to 30 frames, you simply can't turn this fast. There's no way to set the sensitivity that high. So ideally this would be made independent so that you could play at the same sensitivity regardless of frame rate or frame drops. As far as movement, this is about a 37% rounded square dead zone. The corners aren't perfectly circular, which is a little unique. Perhaps this is indicative of diagonal movement in general. Maybe the diagonals are slightly more sensitive because it's pinched in a little more. But this shares the same restricted regions that are present in the camera. So if you're within any of these regions, you'll be moving in one of 4 directions. You can see this the diagonals a little more obviously right around the dead zone. You can see that she's pivoting a little bit, and this may carry that same issue with the camera where there's like a base dead zone and an additional dead zone that's cropping off a bit of the diagonal movement, which could be why this is a little more abrupt than it might be otherwise. The shaded region represents the sprint threshold, so if you try sprinting right here, nothing will happen. If you try sprinting here, you'll begin sprinting. And if you fall under this threshold, you'll stop. So some of the things I'd like to request, if these are issues present in the full versions of the game, is 1, switching these dead zones to simple perfectly circular dead zones. This would make it so that you exit the dead zone at the same distance on any angle, as well as have full diagonal movement. Movement, it doesn't matter too much, but for the camera, that can affect precision a bit. So perfectly circular dead zones. Make the acceleration scale with the dead zone. So ideally, as soon as you pass the dead zone, you're starting at the slowest amount of speed possible. So this will greatly improve the precision you're able to get out of free aim. This game does have some generous auto aim. When you first aim, it'll snap to a target, but you really shouldn't need that. You should be able to free aim very easily, and with some of these changes, that would make that easily possible to do. So make the acceleration start at 0 and then build up from then on. Lastly, options would be nice. Options for the movement dead zone, the camera dead zone, and sort of less importantly, for the acceleration curve. So this game has very simple ranges for the options, so 1 to 10. And to sort of match that range, the dead zone sliders could range from 0 to say 40%. That would help you keep the default for movement, and have it increment in increments of 4%. So that would allow you to mimic the default movement and camera dead zone size pretty accurately, while giving players a lot of control over that. Smaller dead zones can make precise aiming easier, so that combined with the change to make acceleration start slower would really fix all the problems. The acceleration curve isn't terribly important because this isn't a hyper precise shooter or anything, but being able to control between a more exponential curve would make precise adjustments even easier. So that would be could be pretty good. So ranging from a linear curve to say a quadratic curve and having 10 steps in that would give players a huge amount of granularity to customize that. That's not terribly important. But then, though, again, with these options, it would be with these changes by itself, it would be quite a bit better than it is currently. But that about covers things. So really, I think the biggest issue, if nothing else, is fixing this acceleration issue. Quite a few games use axial dead zones, but this can really make aiming feel overly sensitive and really impacts precision the most out of all these issues. So at the very least, ideally that'll be fixed, but hopefully all these things can be added. But that covers things, so thanks for watching, and everyone, have a good rest of your day.